There were 6 dogs in the house the night it caught fire. Not mine, Foster's. I'd been doing rescue work for the county shelter for almost 9 years by then, taking the ones nobody else would take. The old ones, the sick ones, the ones the shelter called, in the polite language of people who run out of room, behavioral. I had a little ranch house on 3/4 of an acre at the edge of town, and I had time and I had patience, and after my husband died I'll be honest with you, I had nothing else. So I took the dogs. There were 6 of them the night of the fire. A blind beagle named Walter, a bonded pair of terriers I was trying to rehome together, a shepherd mix with a heart condition, and 2 puppies somebody had left in a cardboard box outside the shelter in February. None of them made it out. I made it out because I was sleeping on the couch in the living room. The bedroom air conditioner had broken 3 weeks earlier, and the cheap portable unit I'd plugged in to keep the front of the house cool had, at some point around 2 in the morning, sparked against a frayed extension cord and caught the curtains. I lost the house. I lost the dogs. And I want you to hear this carefully. I lost the last photograph I had of my husband, which had been sitting on the mantelpiece for 11 years, and the reason I could not afford to fix the air conditioner, the reason the cheap portable unit was plugged into the wrong extension cord in the first place, was that I had, over the previous 14 months, sent every dollar I had in the world to a man named Anthony, a man who did not exist. This is the story of how that happened, and I want to tell it to you the way it actually happened, which is not the way these stories are usually told. Because the way these stories are usually told is fast. A widow gets scammed, she sends the money, she loses it, the end. That's not how it works. It works slow. I'd been widowed for 12 years when Anthony first messaged me. 12 years. That's the number I want you to hold in your head, because it matters. I was not a woman who'd just lost her husband and was reeling. I was a woman who had, over more than a decade, built a quiet life. I had my dogs, I had my church, I had a part-time job at the library 3 mornings a week. I had 2 adult children who called me on Sundays and a sister in Florida I visited once a year. I was not lonely. That's what I would have told you if you'd asked me. I was alone, but I was not lonely. There is, I've learned, a difference, and it is exactly the size of the difference that they came in through. The message came on Facebook. A Saturday morning in March. I was 68 years old. I had been making coffee. The message said, "Hello, beautiful lady. I hope I am not intruding. I saw your photograph in a comment on the St. Jude's prayer page, and I felt I had to say hello. My name is Anthony." I want to tell you that I deleted it. I want to tell you that I rolled my eyes and blocked him and went on with my morning. I didn't. I read it 3 times. I looked at his photograph. I'm going to use the past tense even though he was never real. He was handsome, graying at the temples, a kind face. He was wearing a white doctor's coat in front of what looked like a hospital. The bio said he was a surgeon working with an international medical relief organization based in the United States, currently deployed to a field hospital in northern Iraq. I wrote back just 2 lines. I said, "That's kind of you. I hope your work is going well." He replied within 20 minutes, "I want to be very clear about something. Anthony," whoever the real person behind that account was, in whatever country he was actually sitting in, Anthony was extraordinarily good at his job. He did not flirt with me, not for weeks. He asked me about my life. He asked me about my dogs. He remembered the name of every single dog I told him about. He remembered the name of my late husband. He asked me 3 weeks in what my husband had been like. And when I answered, when I wrote him a long message at midnight about a man I had not described to anyone in 11 years, he wrote back, and his response was so careful. It was so gentle. It was the response of a man who had read what I'd written and understood it. That is not nothing. I want you to understand that. That is not nothing. I know now that the person on the other end of that message was almost certainly a young man in a compound in Southeast Asia, working from a script, reading my message through a translation app, copying my husband's name into a spreadsheet so he wouldn't forget it later. I know that. I know it intellectually. But I will tell you something that took me a long time to admit to my therapist. For 14 months, somebody asked me how I was every single day. Somebody remembered the name of my blind beagle. Somebody asked me what I'd eaten for dinner. Somebody told me on the anniversary of my husband's death that he was thinking of me. I had not had that from anyone in 12 years, and the worst part, the part I am still, 3 years later, trying to make peace with, is that even now, even knowing it was a man in a compound, even knowing every word was a lie, even knowing what it cost me, some small part of me misses being asked. The first time Anthony asked me for money, it was for an internet connection. That's what makes these scams so hard to see from the outside. People imagine the ask is huge. People imagine you'd see it coming. The first ask was for $250. He was in a remote field hospital, he said. The satellite connection was unreliable. He couldn't talk to me as often as he wanted to. There was a private connection service used by the aid workers. Would I be willing to help him cover the cost for a month just so we could keep talking? I sent it. I sent it because $250 was not, by the standards of my pension, a catastrophic amount of money. I sent it because by that point, 5 months in, I cared whether I heard from him. I sent it because the alternative was not hearing from him. He paid me back 3 weeks later. He insisted. He sent me a Western Union transfer for $270. The extra $20, he said, was interest. He wrote, an old-fashioned man. He did not like to owe a lady money. I want you to understand what that did. It did not just establish trust. It established a category in my head. Anthony was the kind of man who paid you back. Anthony was the kind of man who, when he asked for money, was asking for a reason. And when the reason resolved, the money came back. So when he asked, 2 months later, for $4,000 to cover a medical fee for one of his sons, and when he explained in detail that his ex-wife had emptied the boy's education fund and he could not access his own American bank accounts from the field hospital, I sent it. I want to say I hesitated. I did hesitate. I hesitated for 2 days, but I sent it. He did not pay that one back. He apologized. He was so sorry. The situation with his ex-wife was worse than he had told me. He had not wanted to burden me. He would pay me back the moment he was home. He was, he said, coming home in 8 weeks. That was the first lie I caught. Not in the moment, but later, when I went back through our messages and realized he had been telling me he was coming home in 8 weeks. Every 8 weeks, for nearly a year. By the end of the first year, I had sent Anthony $43,000. I want to tell you what that money was, because the number is not the point. The composition of the number is the point. It was first my checking account, then it was my savings account, then it was, and this is the part I am most ashamed of, it was a small inheritance my husband had left in trust for our grandchildren. I told myself I would replace it. I told myself I was borrowing from it. I told myself Anthony would pay it back when he came home. Then it was a home equity line of credit I opened against the house. Then it was credit cards, 3 of them. Then it was a personal loan from the credit union, for which I had to lie about the purpose on the application. By the time the air conditioner broke, in late June of the second year, I did not have $400 to fix it. I had, on paper, sent that $400 and another $214,000 on top of it to a man who 6 weeks earlier had told me he was being held by what he called compound authorities in a country he could not name, and that he needed a final payment of $60,000 to be released. I did not send the $60,000, not because I had figured anything out, because I did not have it. I had nothing left. That, I think, is what saved my life, although it did not save the dogs. The fire happened on the 4th of July. I remember the date because the local fire department was understaffed that night. Half of them were working a structure fire on the other side of the county, and the rest were managing the fireworks crowd at the town park. By the time they got to me, the house was gone. I sat in a blanket on the back of an ambulance and watched it burn. A neighbor I had barely spoken to in 5 years held my hand. My son, who lived in Albany, was on his way. The fire chief, a man I had gone to high school with, a man whose first wife I had been friends with 30 years earlier, knelt down in front of me and said, "Margaret, was there anybody in the house with you?" And I said, "Just the dogs." And I started crying, and I could not stop crying, and I cried on and off for the next 9 days. I did not tell anybody about Anthony, not for a long time. I moved in with my son. I told him the house had been underinsured, which was true. I told him my retirement had taken a hit in the market, which was, in the most generous possible interpretation of the word market, also true. I told him I would be all right. I told him I just needed time. What I was doing in those first weeks at my son's house was something I am embarrassed to tell you. I was still messaging Anthony. I was telling him about the fire. I was telling him about the dogs, and he was... And you have to understand, by this point, I had no money left to send him, and he knew it, and he was still messaging me. He was telling me how sorry he was. He was telling me he wished he could be there. He was telling me on the night after my son's wife had been short with me at dinner that he loved me. He had never said that before. He said it the week after I had nothing left to give him. I'd like to tell you that's what woke me up. It wasn't. What woke me up was something much smaller and much stupider, and much more accidental. It was my granddaughter. She was 11 years old. She was staying over at her dad's, at my son's, for the weekend, and she came into the guest bedroom on a Sunday morning while I was reading Anthony's most recent message, and she sat down on the edge of the bed and she said, "Grandma, who's that?" And I do not know why I did this even now. I told an 11-year-old child the truth that I had not told a single adult in my life. I told her there was a man I had been talking to, a surgeon in Iraq. I showed her his photograph. She looked at the photograph for maybe 4 seconds, and then she said, "Grandma, that's not him." She took my phone. She opened the photograph. She did something with her fingers I did not understand, and the screen filled up with the same photograph on dozens of websites, forums, other Facebook profiles, dating sites in countries I could not name. The man in the white coat was a surgeon. That part was true. He was a real surgeon in Brazil who had no idea his photograph was being used. His real name was on the first website my granddaughter had found. He had 3 children. He had a wife. He was 41 years old and had never been to Iraq in his life. My granddaughter handed me the phone, and in a voice that was, "I want you to hear this," in a voice that was completely without judgment, she said, "Grandma, I think somebody's been pretending. I'm sorry." I did not cry in front of her. I waited until she had gone back downstairs. Then I cried for about 4 hours. I am 69 years old now. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment over a bakery in my son's town. The smell of bread comes up through the floor every morning at 5. I work 2 days a week as a volunteer at a different shelter, a smaller one that doesn't know my full history, just that I am good with the difficult dogs. I have, between my son's help and a partial fraud victim assistance grant from the state, paid off 2 of the 3 credit cards. The home equity line is gone. Sonne. The house was the only collateral, and the house is gone. The personal loan I will be paying off until I am 76. I will not be leaving any inheritance to my grandchildren. That is the part I cannot, even now, talk about without my voice breaking. I have spoken at 2 AARP fraud prevention workshops. I am, my therapist tells me, allowed to be proud of that. I am still, 3 years later, learning to be. I want to tell you what I have learned. Not so, you'll feel sorry for me. I don't need that. I want to tell you, because if you are listening to this, and somebody has been messaging you, and they are kind, and they are attentive, and they remember the small things, I want you to know what I know now. The scam is not the ask for money. That's just the end of it. The scam is the asking how your day was, every single day, for months, before the money ever comes up. The scam is somebody seeing you, when nobody else has bothered to see you in years or maybe ever, and using that exact hunger to take what you have. And I want to tell you one more thing. If somebody is being kind to you online, and you have not met them in person, and they live conveniently far away, and they cannot video call you because the connection is bad, or the camera is broken, or they are in a place where video is forbidden, take their photograph, hold your finger on it, or right-click it, or hand it to an 11-year-old, and do a reverse image search. It will take you about 4 seconds. If they are real, they will still be there tomorrow. If they are not, and I want you to hear this from a woman who lost her house and her dogs and the last photograph of her husband before she figured it out. If they are not, you will save yourself everything I lost and more. I miss the dogs every day. I miss Walter most. He was blind and he was old, and he had not had a kind hand on him until he came to me. He slept on a folded towel beside my bed for the last 18 months of his life. I tell myself sometimes, on the bad nights, when the smell of the bakery has stopped being comforting and started being just the smell of somebody else's life, I tell myself that Walter knew, that at the end, in the smoke, he knew that the person who had been kind to him was somewhere in the house, that he was not alone. I don't know if that's true. I hope it's true. The Federal Trade Commission estimates that in the year I was being scammed, Americans lost $1.1 billion to romance scams. Most of the people who lose money never report it. Most of them are women. Most of them are over 60. Most of them, and this is the part the statistics will never quite capture, most of them are not foolish. Most of them are not greedy. Most of them are not stupid. Most of them are women who, somewhere along the way, stopped being asked how their day was. And then somebody asked, "Be careful out there, I'll see you next week."